Hi, welcome back to another episode in my channel. This is my 100th video. So I've been cooking a lot of food obviously in the last 8 or 9 months since the channel began, and as it's my 100th video I want to do something different, so as opposed to cooking. So this is my second face-to-face video as it were. The subject for today's talk will be BIR. So for anybody who's not familiar with BIR, it means British Indian Restaurant. So I'm going to be talking in depth my experiences, my opinions of BIR, and hopefully uncover something that you might not know, or something you might not even agree with, or something you even find interesting. So here we go. So what we know in BIR, British Indian restaurants, predominantly 80% of the Indian restaurants in India are owned by Bangladeshis. Now that started in the 1960s and became very popular in their adaptations of South Asian classic food with a British twist, if you like, and since the 1960s BIR, going to an Indian restaurant, is part of British culture. So most of the Bengalis who came over mostly in the 1960s, 70s, 80s onwards are mostly from an area in the north of Bangladesh called Sylhet. Why Sylhet? Why is it a particular region that these restaurant owners are from? Is because it can only be described as people from Sylhet used to cook for British people who lived in the days of the Indian Raj, the British rule of India in the 18th and 19th century, and they cooked for a lot of the colonialists and built up a good reputation for adapting Indian dishes to suit the British palate. So that legacy would be well known in Sylhet, that they're proud people for their cooking heritage and their connection to Britain. So it sort of went hand in hand why 80% of the restaurants in Britain are Bengali owned. So, you know, up until 1947, before 1947, the region that we now know as Bangladesh, the Bay of Bengal, you know, that area east of India, between northeast India and Burma, or Myanmar as it's called now, used to be referred to as Bengal. So in 1947 it became East Pakistan, and what we now know today as Pakistan was West Pakistan. So these are all like pretty strange. It might not really make a lot of sense, but this is how Britain divided a lot of countries, not just in Asia but elsewhere as well. Divided them, gave them their own names, and it was all part of empire really. So in 1971 Bangladesh sort of got its independence and became Bangladesh 1971 onwards. So let's talk about some of the standardizations in food that brought about, and I do apologise that I'm looking down. I have made some notes. I couldn't possibly remember all the things I wanted to address off the top of my head. So in the 1960s it seemed the emergence of the planning by Bengali restaurant owners, business people, that every town in the UK should have an Indian restaurant. You know, almost an identical evolution to Cantonese cuisine, where there's Chinese restaurants in every village in the whole of the UK. Very similar, as we know, there's an Indian restaurant in everywhere, all over Britain. So what's interesting about that is if somebody says, oh, what do you want from the Chinese? You probably know what you want, even if you're in a town you're not familiar with. You usually know what you want to order even before looking at the menu, and it's almost similar to British Indian restaurants. You know that they're going to have the boonas, the dansaks, the dupyazas, the madras, the vindaloo, the paffia, the ceylon. It's very, very typical, isn't it? So standardization became essential for people to recognise and become familiar with these types of dishes. and this became what most people would consider to be BIR. Not really Indian restaurants or Pakistani, Indian, Asian restaurants, but BIRs typically, the forerunners of that is Bangladeshi. So the standardization was brought about: base gravy, as we all know, mixed powder, pre-cooked meat, pre-cooked vegetables, aluminium pans for rapid heat distribution, caramelization that adds to the taste. Everything was done. Mostly it was prepped during the week, and most of the most efficient techniques for labour saving and economy reasons, also very labour and cost effective, minimum staff and maximum profit, obviously. So a lot of prep goes into BIR, as we know. In my book particularly, I do warn people that the first 18 pages are just the prep, even before you start cooking a curry. And as it's a British Indian restaurant food at home book, it has to follow the same formula as what's authentic to most BIR restaurants. So the prep was usually prepared midweek, and I think Indian restaurants, as opposed to Chinese, they're very much a weekend thing, aren't they? Friday, Saturday. So really busy. Went hand in hand with the beer culture. A lot of people would have a skinful and then go over to the restaurant and be macho, and that type of typical thing that I'm sure we've all heard if we've read anything about this type of food. So hence the buffets that we get on a Sunday in an Indian restaurant. The prep Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, then the mad rush Friday and Saturday, and then things start to slow down, in terms of customer volumes, and you have a buffet then on a Sunday, and maybe a gourmet night on a Monday, where you can have a starter, a side, naan, a bread, and a main dish, all for $9.95, for example. And the point of that Saturday buffet, or the Sunday buffet, or the Monday gourmet night, or whatever they want to call it, is to just use up everything that was made on Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. Just so nothing goes to waste. So give people a bargain, and nothing goes into the bin. So that was a little bit about the standardization anyway. So I would say, and we all know, and anybody that's interested in the subject, the BIR restaurants are in decline increasingly. I think the heyday of the industry was in the late 80s, 90s, where I started working as a schoolboy part-time. That was the heyday. It was really busy. You had like 8-9 staff. It was, chock-a-block on the weekends, lots of prep, really busy. It's been in decline ever since. The shift in trends in the UK, restaurants and pubs alike, people are more cost aware. We've had the credit crunch, we've had the recession, so people have really revised what they do with their money for leisure, and some have mentioned visa restrictions for some of the decline of the restaurants, which is really interesting, because if somebody's going to come from Sylhet to work in a restaurant in the UK, and we already know that the BIR standardization was catered towards the British palate, the food here bears no resemblance to what it does in Sylhet. So I'm not really sure how anybody can blame the visa restrictions, because simple fact of the matter is a chef can't get a visa anymore to come to Britain, as opposed to the 80s and 90s, where the food industry needed fresh recruits, and we offered visas for chefs. But I don't agree that that's part of the reason why the industry is in decline, for the simple reason, as I've just mentioned, the food in Sylhet or Bangladesh has no relation to BIR whatsoever. So I don't see how people make that correlation. What it is you've got 8 staff in a restaurant, you're a business owner, there's a recession in the country, you need the cheapest staff as possible. Yeah, somebody born in the UK, You know, they get used to earning a certain amount of money. They have better education, more expectations, etc. It's going to be a lot cheaper to import some staff that are used to working for £6-7 a week. Yeah, so it's all about cost effectiveness. So let's have a look here. I do apologise for looking back. So the Bangladeshis are now reaching their third, fourth generation, depending on how long they've been here, and many of the second and third generation are choosing more qualified professions. I don't think it's every guy's, it's usually men, isn't it? Every guy's dream to grow up and want to be a BIR chef in a restaurant, or work in a BIR kitchen. It's not a very big, inspiration, is it? So, thousands of restaurants have already have closed already, and it's predicted by quite a good source lately that 50% of the British Indian restaurants will be closed within the next 10 years. That's according to the Telegraph, which is really interesting. So, shifting trends in the UK, money's tighter, there's various reasons. So, staff, quite a lot of restaurant staffs and cooks go from job to job. Sometimes the work isn't that stable. Like I said, the standardization of the food only increases the likelihood of people changing jobs, because the restaurants are very similar in their style. But what happens, when you've got a chef working in one restaurant maybe for 2 or 3 years, decides to go to another restaurant, and that's happening a lot. So what you do have then is a degeneration slightly of the quality of the food in many regions, and each restaurant then becomes almost identical. One person picks up the habits and requirements of the owner in one restaurant, then moves over, half a mile up the road and starts working in another restaurant, and the food in that restaurant tastes like the other restaurant, and so forth. So it's degenerated somewhat, and you've only got to look at different regions. Brick Lane, nearly every restaurant's identical. Yeah, some describe themselves as, this is a grill, this is a tandoor restaurant, this is a Bangladeshi Indian restaurant. But people do go from job to job, and when that happens multiple times over the years, you get a standardization. Look at the Curry Mile, for example. Very few restaurants left on it, and very, very similar from one restaurant to the other. It's more being taken over more by Arabic restaurants, shisha lounges, that type of thing. So, and these staff, a lot of them are offered packages, deals by the restaurant owner. For example, some of them work very long hours, and they have a package. They might have a complete package where, for example, they have accommodation, they have this, that and the other, they have a food on from the kitchen, all taken off their wages. They might work 200 hours a month, for example, and get £1,000 cash, and possibly have to share accommodation. And I've heard a lot of stories about how bleak it is. So I've heard stories of 3 or 4 staff all living in a room with newspaper over the windows, and just not very great, is it, if you want to be creative? So there's more evidence there to show how I think the passion of the industry has really lowered itself. It's become very competitive. So many leave, many have lost their passion, many are not treated fairly by their employees. Many don't speak English, many are illegal. Yeah, not all of them, this isn't an accusation. So they're sort of trapped in the restaurant industry where they don't have to rely on communication unless they're the waiter. So, in my opinion, and I've tasted and sampled this myself, the BIR standard has been dramatically in decline for the last 10 years or so. Very often and not disappointed, eating the food, You know, you could have good reviews in a restaurant. You know, as soon as the food arrives, you taste it, you look at it, and sorry, but it's one of those, you've got to put it down to experience. Let's just eat up and let's leave. You know, heartless, effortless. Just, I don't know. I don't know whether how many of you can identify with that, but it happens to me quite regularly. I'd say a very small proportion of these restaurants offer anything really great to eat anymore. You know, I'd much, you know, I'm finding going to Pakistani Balti restaurants really great now. Traditional or authentic Indian food really great now. You know, they've got restaurants that cater to it. You know, just two examples of what I've just mentioned. Really great. Adil's in Birmingham, Stony Lane. Amazing. Really good food, consistent. Doesn't have a vast menu, but it's consistent all the time. It's reasonably good quality. The taste, it's really great. Nothing like a BIR restaurant where, as I've just mentioned. And another one in Stoke Newington in North London, Rasa. You know, I go to the vegetarian section. There's two. There's one across the road that does meat, and then there's the one on the left of the road as you go towards London that does vegetarian. Second to non-food. Nothing like BIR. Absolutely fantastic. Mind-blowing food. And when you just think about those two restaurants, it just blows BIR away. You know, the quality, the service, the standards, the price, sometimes the honesty, in all fairness. So, you know, there's hope for the industry, but it's going to change. But, you know, on a brighter note, there are some great Bangladeshi run restaurants. There's one up in Huddersfield, can't remember it, but that was mind-blowing. That was really good. You could really feel the passion. So let's have a look. The food. There's a lot of tricks that a lot of these BIR restaurants play. A few, you know, all about maximising profits. You'd never get fresh vegetables to begin with. You might have a couple of green peppers if you're lucky, but it's all frozen. It's all, you know, it's the cheapest. You know, the majority of the time, it's the most cheapest crap you can get all put together. And I know the base gravy and the spices sort of covers any of the cheap ingredients. You know, quite often and not. You walk in there and it's as soon as you go there, the whole menu is to get you to spend as much as possible. You'll go in there, they won't bring the menu over, you'll have to ask for it. If it's not already on the table, it'll be, oh, drinks, okay, then the menu, then, oh, starter. You know, how many times have you had this happen to you? Waiter, oh, starters, yep, side, main, rice, bread, wine list next to the menu. Wow. You order all the food. If you follow how they'd like to convey you, you'll end up paying a fortune. You know, you start out thinking, oh, I'll just get this and that, and you end up buying more because they've got quite a subtly persuasive way of conveying you through the menu to maximise your spend, really. You know, there's other tricks as well. You know, how many times have you ordered poppadoms, just poppadoms? The chutney tray is on the menu. I'm sure you can read and talk. If you want the chutney tray, you'd ask for it. You know, it could be £1.50 per person, for example. And 2 or 3 poppadoms come, and then the chutney tray. You think, I didn't ask for that. Yeah, it's all, you know, there's 2 of you at the table, there's another £3. Always ask, excuse me, I didn't order the chutney. Or sometimes if you ask in the beginning, oh, it's free. So that's another trick I've had played on me a good few times. It's a couple of pound, but, you know, it's better to be upfront. You know, I really like Pakistani restaurants as well, the BYO, bring your own. You know, they don't have alcohol licenses, especially a lot of the Balti restaurants, which is really another great thing about Pakistani restaurants. If you're on a night out or you want to enjoy your meal with friends, you can bring your own booze, and straight away they'll bring you a jug of water. It's just really, really good, how it is in Asia. Yeah. So, and another disadvantage, when the waiter wants to load your table with food, when you get really full, sometimes I'm so full now, and it might put you off going back, because I can't even, I've eaten so much, I can't even think about food now, and it's not a good experience to eat too much at a restaurant. So that's a discrepancy that goes against the restaurant, if you ask me, as well. And another thing that goes on behind the scenes, and this isn't an accusation, but it does happen. Nothing goes to waste. In the majority of restaurants, BIR, yeah, nothing goes to waste. I'll give you an example. Have you ever ordered a curry with meat chunks in it, and there are two different qualities of meat? One looks pretty fresh and one looks pretty old. Yeah, how does that happen? It's because simply when somebody's finished their food, you leave, it's all taken to the kitchen, and I've seen this happen with my own eyes on numerous occasions. That food is scraped back and recycled straight off somebody's plate that's been discarded and left. You'd think it went in the bin, but nothing goes to waste. It's all about maximum profit. And it's the same if you order a vegetable dish. I've ordered vegetable dish, 1 sprout or 2 pieces of sweet corn kernels. And you think, how did there's no, how is the vegetables not equal? It's again the recycling, scraping plates back into something. Same with the rice. Rice is not going to be thrown away. Same with the chutney tray with the poppadoms. You might only eat half of those. They fill 3 or 4 little containers or little pots full of different dips, sauces, raita, whatever, date, paste, whatever it is. And you usually leave half of them, don't you? The coriander, the mint, the blah blah blah. That will go back into the main pot of each of those as well. Nothing will go to waste. It just wouldn't make sense economically, would it? There's nothing really wrong with that. It's subject to bacterial, waterborne viruses. It's very rare, actually, to be honest. So let's have a look here. Just bear with me one moment. And the peas are a telltale sign with vegetable dishes as well. You order, I don't know, a vegetable curry, and there'll be some old peas that are grey green, and there'll be some bright green peas. Another telltale sign that they're recycling food. It's not a good look. It wasn't long ago I went up to a restaurant, not saying no names, but somebody I was with ordered, the meat, half of it was fresh, half of it looked days old. It was fresh a good couple of days ago, and it's pretty usual, so it was eaten. But I did speak to the waiter at the end of the night, and I said, there's 2 different qualities of meat there. One looked really old, one looked quite new, one looked fresh. And he said, why did you come so late? What an excuse, eh? So it's my fault for going to a restaurant at 11:10 that should happen. What a lame excuse. And it's typical. It's pretty typical. He gave me 15% off, because usually when you give some discount, that person, if they've pointed out a valid error or a hygiene or standard violation, you offer a discount, and more than likely the person isn't going to submit a review. Might not ever come back, but somebody's given you 15% off that dish or something you've complained about. You wouldn't be very nice to go in and make submit an unfavourable review with it. So they know what they're doing. You get some dishes that are peanut or nut based, cashews, almonds, that type of thing. A lot of restaurants are using peanuts instead. That's how competitive it is, and that's what a drive to make their companies profitable. You know, not long ago, somebody, a restaurant owner, went to prison for manslaughter because he insisted that when that customer bought a korma, oh no, there's no peanuts, no, it's cashews, it's almonds, it's coconut, whatever. But they unfortunately use peanuts as a cheaper alternative. You know, peanuts are 25% of the price of almonds and cashews. So, you know, you can Google that if you'd like more details. So, round up, personally, I've had enough, and in my experience, 80% of the British Indian restaurants, typically Bengali, sorry, no offence, but I'm just stating some facts, personal opinions. Other people might have very different opinions, but I finished with it. I've come back to this country. I used to love BIR, you know, used to be really great in its heyday, I think, but after returning from Asia, and, you know, eager to start a journey in BIR all over the UK. I'm an area representative or manager, so I get around the country, and lots of bad experiences. 9 out of 10, it's crap. Excuse the phrase. It's a rip-off, and I feel cheated, and I'm quite often treated like a tourist in my own country. So there's a couple I'll go to. A lot of them have got fancy decor and no substance, no heart in the food. You know, they've laid out the initial investment to make it look impressive, but the food, more often than not, is substandard. But there are a couple I really do go to when I'm in the area, though, I must say. So it's not a total whitewash. So, on the other hand, you know, as we mentioned, real Indian food, authentic Pakistani food, excellent in my opinion. Higher standard, rarer, more unique, more traditional dishes, spicier, you know, water to the table, BYO, bring your own, it's all great. Really, really good, you know, very pristine, very, you know, authentic, much better in my opinion. So this is my 100th video. Thank you very much for watching. How to round this off. So yeah, so that was my opinion on BIR, why it's declining, some of the reasons why, and a little bit of background information on the industry. In my opinion, everybody will know something different, and let's get the comment box filled up below. So I have a couple of videos coming up shortly. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of a restaurant chain called Saravana Bhavan. It's an Indian restaurant chain. It's amazing. The food is great. They have them in India, Singapore, Malaysia. There's a couple in London. There's one in Wembley. Saravana Bhavan. But some time ago, I befriended one of the chefs, and I have some quite privileged recipes that is standard, and those recipes are cooked in countries with that particular restaurant. So that's coming up, some more authentic recipes. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope I did say at least a couple of interesting things, a little bit negative, and I'm sorry about that, but we are talking BIR, and this is my opinion of it finally. It's a video I've wanted to do for some time. So that was that anyway. Well, thank you very much for watching, and hope you tune in to more of my videos in the past and the future. Thanks for watching.